So today we have Dr. Lewis here with us to share some very important information regarding the COVID vaccines. But before we start, Dr. Lewis, would you share some information about your background, please?
Sure. Evelyn Lewis, as Ms. Bowens mentioned, I am the current president and chair of the Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation. And we've been working a lot with veterans during this time, as you might imagine, in regard to them getting their vaccines, getting tested, and making their way through this most difficult period.
Thank you. And we appreciate that you've agreed to provide some brief information on the COVID vaccines. Can you tell us, between the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, tell us more about them and what is the difference, if there is any?
Sure. Now most people are very familiar with both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. They were the first two to be approved and have been very much integrated into the population at this point. And so when they came out, everyone was talking about their effectiveness. And so many people look at Pfizer as the one being 95% effective, and then as Moderna touts a rate of 94% effectiveness. And then a few weeks or so ago, Johnson & Johnson's vaccine was approved. And I think the confusion arose when people began to hear the number 72, 73% effective. And so that became a bit confusing in that it seemed as though it was not as good as the first two vaccines that were approved.
You're right, there has been a lot of confusion and there's so much information out there. What kind of protection do these vaccines offer?
Well, as I mentioned, what people primarily refer to as the numbers they heard in the beginning, 94% and 95% effective, and then hearing that 72% effectiveness for Johnson & Johnson. The other differences that you encounter with these vaccines are that the first two require 2 shots to be completely vaccinated, and Johnson & Johnson is 1 shot. And it requires also less maintenance in that it does not have to be in a freezer. It can be maintained in the refrigerator. But again, the one point I'd like to drive home is that irrespective of those numbers that you hear, the focus should be on the effectiveness of these vaccines, and all of them reduce, if not eliminate, the seriousness from getting COVID-19 if you were to still contract it, and also prevention of hospitalization around that virus.
Well, thank you for sharing those differences. Are there any differences in the side effects of these vaccines?
Well, probably not significant differences. From what most people have reported, particularly with Pfizer and Moderna, are sort of mild to moderate flu-like symptoms of fever, low grade, headaches sometimes, body aches and pains. With Johnson & Johnson, it's very much the same. However, it may be mild to moderate or slightly severe symptoms in regard to those flu-like symptoms. Higher fevers, body aches and pains for a slightly longer period of time. But there's not much differences. Oh, and let me remind you also, because J&J is 1 shot, obviously it's anywhere from 12 to 24 hours later that you'll begin to experience those side effects. And with Pfizer and Moderna, there are 2 shots. And typically, most people report those symptoms after the second shot.
So after they receive the vaccine, do they still have to wear a mask or social distance?
At this point in time, that is still highly recommended. As you can remember, the when we were recommending wearing of masks, it was both to protect you and to protect the community. And so that is still very much in play in regard to why the masks are still required. Even after you are vaccinated, those out there who aren't, it is a protection for them. So that's highly recommended along with social distancing, particularly if you're outside and among other community members.
So does that mean that family members that have been vaccinated can now have small family gatherings again?
That is indeed the case. If you have been vaccinated, but not everyone in your family, you can indeed gather with them, even in closed environments, and have family dinners, conversation, socialization. As long as those family members who have not been vaccinated are not at high risk for catching the disease. So, indeed, you can do that. You don't have to honor any social distancing or anything of that nature.
Dr. Lewis, from your perspective, what do you think is the most important thing for people to know regarding the COVID vaccine?
Well, one of the most important factors I would want people to know and sort of take away as an understanding of our discussion today is that all three of the vaccines are effective. Forget about the numbers of 94, 95, 72, 78%. Forget those numbers and just recognize that they're all very effective in protecting against severe COVID infections and hospitalizations as a result of COVID infections, because those are the two things that have led to us losing our loved ones in the numbers of 500 plus thousand.
Dr. Lewis, thank you very much for that brief yet very informative summary of the COVID vaccines.
Well, you're more than welcome. I realize this has been very confusing and stressful time for people. And so as best we can, as these updates come, we will again have additional sessions where we brief people on the updates, because we have AstraZeneca that has a vaccine that is now out and approved in our European countries, but not yet in the United States. And so as soon as we hear more about those, we'll continue our updates to keep everyone informed. But thank you again for having me here, and I look forward to talking with you again later.
Thank you very much.